There are many moments in Steven Spielberg's film AI that suggests that the line between mecha and orga, machine and human, is thin, if not non-existent. The most obvious moment where this occurs, I mentioned this in the other lecture, is in the edit between Sheila, the mecha, putting makeup on in Professor Hobby's lecture room, and Monica, the very next scene, putting makeup on in the car with her husband. This suggests that both women are consumed by the same concerns. They're both very much attuned to how they look, attuned to appearance. In fact, the two women look very much alike. They have similar facial features. Let's think about Professor Hobby himself. Clearly, he's in the role of Victor Frankenstein, who makes an artificial human to fulfill a hole in his own heart. He makes an artificial human out of a deep sense of grief, having lost his own son, just as Victor Frankenstein makes his creature possibly out of his grief over the loss of his mother. Professor Hobby, at the opening of the film, in the, let's call it the presentation sequence, where he is presenting to his colleagues what Sheila, the robot, the female robot, can do, he also proposes that at this point he and his team make a young boy robot that can think and feel just like a human does. Now, this presentation sequence, to me, is highly theatrical. It's very staged. Every time Professor Hobby asks Sheila to do something, no matter how minor it is, suddenly everyone in the room erupts in a kind of applause. It's as if it's automatic, as if it's pre-planned, as if it's scripted. And the way Professor Hobby himself moves and talks feels very stiff and scripted. And his effect is very flat. He himself seems as much a machine as Sheila herself does. A lack of feeling, a sense that his actions need to be immediately reciprocated in an automatic way. Furthermore, the fact that even though he's a scientist, his vision of the world is capitalistic. He says that, yes, we can fulfill the needs of parents who want children by creating this robot boy, but also it's a new market where we can make a lot of money. So there's a cynicism, again, a lack of what we might call warmth and emotion in this character that makes him feel very mechanistic. What about Monica? Notice where she lives. It's very gray, very dimly lighted. She herself wears gray and dark clothing quite a bit. There's something almost mechanical about her too. We could say that she, like Professor Hobby, is grieving, and this takes away warm affect from her. It makes her appear as if she is somewhat flat, as a machine might appear somewhat flat. And her insensitivity to David, sending him out all alone into the forest, could be another marker of a lack of warmth and feeling. So the humans, the two primary humans in the film, seem to behave like machines. In this regard, we can think of Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, where the so-called humans, like Deckard, behave as machines, androids, robots traditionally would behave. Now let's look at the other side of it. We can look at David. David feels much more intensely than any of the so-called human characters, any of the orgas. That's all he is. He's extreme, intense, pained feeling, and tragically, he will never get this longing fulfilled. The minute he is exiled out into the forest, abandoned by his mother, just as the creature is abandoned by Victor Frankenstein, he is doomed to a life of pain. He's programmed to love someone that will never love him back, someone who will not even allow him in her presence. Now, what about Gigolo Joe, the Jude Law character? He and Teddy, I guess in some ways, are an amalgamation of the Jiminy Cricket character, if you think of the Pinocchio film. Obviously, Professor Hobby's not only Victor Frankenstein, but also is Geppetto, who creates the puppet Pinocchio in the old story. Well, Gigolo Joe says at one point, after he does a little dance, Jude Law apparently studied the work of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly for this character. When he does a little dance, David says, "Why do you do that?" And Joe says, "Well, that's just something I do." Well, this, of course, is how machines are. Machines do what they do. They are programmed to do actions in a repetitive way, and they have no choice over how they will act, when they will act, why they will act. They simply act. So just as Joe does his little jig, so David himself yearns. It's a bad lot that he's been programmed to yearn. However, just as Joe is being pulled up into the air by some sort of super magnet, because of course he is a fugitive from the law, he has been framed for killing a woman by a disgruntled husband, he says to David, "I am." Well, this, of course, is the primal marker of self-consciousness. You would not say "I am" unless you are aware of yourself as an I. So this Cartesian moment, Descartes, of course, famously said, "I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum," is spoken by a machine, by mecha, and we would normally not expect mecha to be self-conscious. So this suggests that maybe the mecha are more self-aware than the orga. No wonder the orga fear the mecha. "I am," he says, he's pulled up. "I was," he says, as he's pulled up even higher, knowing that he will soon die. Does he learn self-consciousness in the course of his interactions with David, or is he programmed to be self-conscious? We don't know. By the end of the film, David, for the first time, is able to sleep, and ostensibly for the first time is able to dream. Does this mean that he himself has also changed in the course of the film, and he's achieved a kind of mental depth that he has not had? Again, we don't know. But throughout the film, there's an abiding irony, and that is that the main human characters tend to behave in overtly mechanistic ways, and the main mecha characters tend to behave in overtly human ways. Again, if the human is not some constitution, flesh and bone, but if the human is a set of behaviors, the ability to sympathize, the ability to empathize, the ability to be aware of what you're doing, the ability to yearn for something, to have a purpose, to think in terms of metaphor, to dream.